right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Special Education Advisory Panel meeting. I would like to call our meeting to order at 9:35. Um, so, uh, would like to recognize LDOE staff and some of our BESSY staff that are here um, today in support and in the audience. So I know many folks here know and have met my team. So we have some policy data support personnel from our team here, as well as some of our instructional support I've seen kind of coming in and out today as well. So I'm super thankful for them and for all they do to help us support getting these meetings set up and moving smoothly. I'd also like to recognize, I see our BESSY board president, Mr. Ronnie Morris, in attendance. Also several other LDOE staff, our special education council, our special education ombudsman, Chastity, Ty, they're sitting here to my left. So certainly want to recognize all the LDOE staff in the room as well. Thanks to all of our public participants who are in the audience. I know as our selection committee worked to put together our special education panel, one of the things that we were constantly telling all of those folks is please come to the meeting, have your voice heard. You can offer public comment and still participate. And so I see some of those folks here as well. So I'm very excited that, that you all came. Before we get started, and I will say for our public participants, you can see, Chelsea, we have blue comment cards over here on the table. And as public comment is received after each item, we have a special section here right to my right where you can come up and provide that public comment as well. Yeah, just a reminder for our panel members and for public comment, if you'll speak into the mic. Sometimes we have difficulty on our live stream for folks who are listening in to hear if we're not speaking into the mic. So I'll try to give those reminders throughout our meeting today as well. So just before we get started going through our agenda items, with the release this past week of our statewide performance on LEAP, I wanted to offer up this particular slide today just to get us kicked off around the important work of SEEP and the work that we're excited to do together to continue to improve outcomes for our students with disabilities across the state. So this particular chart shows that, and this is pretty precedent. This isn't really happening across the country. All of our students across the state this year, you can see our total population kind of level out in terms of LEAP achievement, but our students with disabilities continue to grow this year, this past year, and they grew 1%. And that's all subjects combined, all grades. And so I think there's a lot of good work that has been happening. There's a lot of work that SEEP impacts, I think, that also impacts this growth. So this should be something that we're very proud of in our state. I know we're going to go into a little bit more a little bit later in a specific agenda item about performance, even performance of our students with significant disabilities as well. But I wanted to start off certainly celebrating this continued growth for our students. I don't think anyone here is satisfied or says, hey, this is where we want to be. No one is satisfied with 12% of our kids with disabilities showing mastery, though that is a very high bar in terms of proficiency for these students. And certainly we want to keep pushing. Certainly we want to see even more growth. I'd like to see more incremental growth each year than just 1%. I also want to just explain here. So our kids with disabilities have shown progress for 3 years in a row. So let me explain why you see 11% in 21-22, 11% in 22-23. So this past year, social studies with our new standards was a field test that was not a scored assessment, so social studies is not included for 23-24. So what we did for true year-to-year comparison, we went back for all those other years on this chart, also took out social studies. But last year with social studies in 21-22 was at 9%, 22-23 was at 10. So it has actually been a percent growth for each of the past 3 years. But this one, we took out social studies for a true comparison. So just a little context there, but certainly very proud of our students, proud of their families who also help them. You know, we say parents are also teachers first, and so really excited about continuing to show this progress. So let's get to our first agenda item, which is introductions for all of our new members. So can I get a motion to receive this first agenda item? Motion by Ashley McReynolds.
Second, Alvada Willis.
Thank you, Alvada. All right, so what I would like for us to do, I know we did a really great virtual onboarding for new members. We had many folks attend. We even had some of our previous members who have experience who attended, and they offered really great advice for new members. So that was great as well. But I want to take a moment for us to also go around the table and kind of introduce ourselves in this setting and for anyone who wasn't on our onboarding. So if you will, we'll kind of go around. Ms. Champagne and I will start. Your name and what is your connection with students with disabilities in our state? Ms. Champagne, you want to kick us off?
Thank you. Simone Champagne. I'm the appointed member of Bessie, appointed by the governor in January. I'd like to thank Mr. Ronnie Morris, our president, that's with us today to appointing me to this very important committee. I want you all to know that we are with you. We have done great work, I believe, over the last several years, but like Meredith said, we have a lot left to do. And I respect you immensely for what you do, not only in the public, in the community, and on this committee, but also at home in taking care of your children and your students with disabilities. I have a granddaughter that has disabilities. She's 21 years old today and beautiful. Not to say the least, I have her spoiled, just like I'm sure any parent has their children spoiled. And so I understand your plight and her parents' plight. So I appreciate y'all. Thank you for wanting to serve and giving your time to this important committee. Thank Meredith. I say all the time, Meredith is the brains here, and she's good, but she has so much passion and compassion, which is what I think we all need. So thank y'all. I appreciate it.
Good morning. I'm Meredith Jordan. For those who don't know me, I am our director for diverse learners here at the department. So that's all things special education, instruction, our policy, all of our federal and state reporting that we are responsible for, that lives on my team. I also have one person on my team who leads out on our English learner work. But the vast majority of folks on my team, 10 individuals, spend their day in and day out helping us administer our statewide special education programming and offering support to our educators, building capacity for leaders, educators, and also working with families alongside other folks at the department as well. It is truly passion. I have personal family connections as well as just over 20 years of experience in actually started in gifted and talented and quickly became interested in students with challenges, students who I say need us the most. And so I'm really excited to be here and to do this work and to continue to see the growth and improvement that we are seeing with our kids with disabilities. And we know that we still have a lot of really important work to do. And that is exactly why we're here to get the feedback and input of all of you on our panel. So I'm excited to work alongside you. And Ms. Aaron, we'll go to you.
My name is Erin Downing, and I work for the Office for Citizens with Developmental Disabilities. We provide services to all people in the state with disabilities.
I am Ashley McReynolds. I am a parent of an 18-year-old and also work at the Arc of Louisiana, which has been um, around for over 70 years. We have a pretty large focus on transition services. We have done that work for a number of years, and we actually partner with our affiliated chapters of the local ARCs that are around the state, who are the ones providing these transition services, partnering with local schools, and ensuring that students exiting school have a proper transition plan, whether that's to post-secondary opportunities or employment services.
Good morning. I'm Angela Miles. I'm from Shreveport, Louisiana. I have a 4-year-old who is nonverbal, and I'm excited to be here to serve along everyone.
Hi, good morning. I'm Melissa Baham. I'm the Director of Louisiana Rehabilitation Services. We administer the vocational rehabilitation program here in Louisiana, which includes pre-employment transition services, which are services for students with disabilities.
Good morning, all. Dejanay Clark-Jackson. I serve on this committee as a parent rep. I have a high school junior who is a student with disabilities, thriving, not just surviving. I also wear multiple hats like many of us do. I'm in education. I also lead the statewide grassroots parent-led organization, Decoding Dyslexia Louisiana. And I am a licensed dyslexia therapist as well as a former classroom teacher. So I'm just very glad to be here. And if anyone wants to have a conversation, I'm always available.
Good morning. I'm Rebecca Huff, and I have a dual role. I am the Special Ed Director for Franklin Parish, located in Northeast Louisiana. And I'm also a parent, which is the most important role, to a daughter who is 13 and is deaf.
I am Jeremy Bell. I am the higher ed representative from University of Louisiana, Monroe. I'm an assistant professor there, special education program coordinator. And next week, we launch the first CTP program in Northeast Louisiana called ACES. So we're going to admit students with intellectual disabilities. So I'm looking forward to working with that program.
Good morning. My name is Alvada Willis, and I am Director of Special Education for St. Landry Parish. I'm happy to be on this board again, and I look forward to the work ahead.
Good morning. I'm Donna Reno. I'm the parent of a child with a disability. He's 23 with Down syndrome. And I also work in the school system. I ODR the IEPs in my school.
Morning, everyone. My name is Brandy Hewling, and I serve at a charter school in the city of New Orleans, and I've been supporting diverse learners for the past 22 years, and so I'm excited to be a part of this process.
Good morning. I'm Sally Rose Gaglione. I work at St. Michael's Special School. It's my 9th year being a teacher of students with disabilities, and happy to be here.
My name is Michael Thompson. I own a HBCS company in Alexandria, Louisiana, offices in Ball and in Natchitoches. I also have a disabled daughter who is in her 40s and has many challenges, most unseen. But we also represent and care for a number of participants in the program. And I have a number of those people that are employed with me that I'll be bringing along with their children as we meet. They'll be very interested in that. So I look forward to serving. I was invited by Lance Harris, and this is my first time, so I'm excited to be here.
Good morning. I'm Rebecca Beard. I've been a teacher for, this is going into my 17th or 18th year, something like that. I've worked in a variety of settings, both special ed, regular ed, and deaf ed. I've worked at Louisiana School for the Deaf. I've worked in Lafayette Parish, and I'm currently working in West Baton Rouge Parish as a special education teacher. I have a hearing loss. I grew up with an IEP and receiving these services, so it's nice to be able to give back to the community that gave me so many opportunities. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks, everybody. And we definitely look forward to. Oh, will you do a quick introduction, just your name and connection with students with disabilities in our state?
Good morning, Latrice LaCour. I'm the State Foster Care Manager for the Department of Children and Family Services. And we serve about 8,800 children per year with currently a little over 4,000 children currently in care.
Thank you, Latrice. Definitely look forward to the input and value that this group will add here for our work this year. So I'm going to do an official roll call now. So when I call your name, if you'll just respond with present, that'll be perfect. Melissa Baham, Rebecca Beard, Dr. Jeremy Bell,
Present.
Miss Simone Champagne, Aaron Downing, Dr. Sally Rose. Say your last name again. When you said it, I said, I'm going to remember how she said it. Christy Gonzalez, absent. Rebecca Huff, Brandy Hewling, Dejanay Clark-Jackson, Caroline Jurish, absent. Miss Latrice LaCour, Ashley McReynolds, Angela Miles, present. Danielle Porre, absent. Dr. Donna Reno, Miss Julia Tanner, absent. Michael Thompson,
Present.
Jessica White, and Miss Alvada Willis. Great, and we have a quorum. So our first item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes for March, and so we'll need a motion to receive and a second.
I second.
Who was our second? Miss Angela Miles. Any discussion on those minutes? Any public comment on those minutes? Seeing none, item passes, and we'll move to the next agenda item. Our next agenda item is discussion around our current co-chair vacancy. We'll need a motion to receive and a second. And a second. Mr. Michael Thompson. So really here, I just wanted to bring to you all just an awareness and a discussion. We currently have a co-chair seat vacant. And so we're not going to have elections today. We have quite a full agenda, as you can see. But what we will do is for our September meeting, we'll go ahead and select and vote on a co-chair. And essentially our co-chair helps us facilitate the meetings, prepare for meetings, prepare our agenda items, work together to kind of put forward a successful meeting with managing our agenda for each meeting. So if you're interested in serving as co-chair, if you will let myself or Chelsea know, we can make sure that we have your interest noted, and we'll have elections for our next meeting. So just kind of wanted to bring that to your attention, give you guys an update around what we're going to do around the vacancy and how we're going to handle that. Do y'all have any questions about the co-chair responsibilities, what that would look like? Okay, any public comment on this item? So just a reminder, if you're interested, catch us after the meeting, myself or Chelsea, just let me know, hey, I'd be interested in serving in that capacity on the panel. Okay, and we'll move to our next item. So our next couple of items, of course, are our heavy items for today. Let's get a motion and a second to receive our discussion around alternate assessment participation and our 1% cap. Dejanay. And we'll need a second. And Rebecca. I wanted to bring this item to you all just to kind of talk about. It's certainly something that we are going to have to address as a panel and as a state. So I want to open up the discussion today, and then likely we'll have some next steps for our next meeting. So what is this 1% cap? The federal U.S. Department of Education and ESSA sets for all states that we should have 1% of our students with disabilities who participate in an alternate assessment. So for Louisiana, that is our LEAP Connect assessment. The reason for that cap is that particular assessment and alternate standards, highly modified curriculum, participation in an alternate assessment is truly reserved for that small percent of students who have significant cognitive disabilities and struggle or have challenges with grade level general education curriculum and accessing a regular LEAP assessment. IEP teams come together, talk about this decision annually on what assessment is appropriate for the student. Do they meet the eligibility criteria? But wanted to clarify that this is not a cap that the state puts on. This is a federal regulation that says you have to be at 1%. Of course, Louisiana is over. We are at right now 1.7% participation in alternate assessment in both ELA and math. And we have been around 1.6 or 1.7 for several years. We have been in conversation, so we apply for a federal waiver every year to OSIP and the U.S. Department of Education to allow us to go over that cap, and we've got to do something about it. We can't continue to request these waivers every year, and we're not showing progress to at least get closer to 1, or at least go in the right direction. So I wanted to kind of bring this discussion to you all, show you what our current criteria is, and we'll bring forward a proposal to the next meeting, kind of based on what we talk about, any input that you all may have around how we may address. Part of that is going to be how we monitor and reach out to LEAs who are way over 1%, or even in some cases, if they are over what even our state average is, 1.7. And so kind of really working toward how do we start to take steps to move that participation percentage down. One of the things that I want to bring to you for consideration is, so you can start thinking about this, this is our current eligibility criteria. This was updated several years ago, probably more than 4 or 5 years ago now, maybe around 2017, don't quote me. But our participation criteria for alternate assessment has been updated, not recently, not since this current administration. But what you can see is these are the different criteria in which students may be made eligible for alternate assessment. So any eligible students should be functioning 3 or more standard deviations below the mean in their cognitive functioning. If you've completed, that's for students who haven't completed 5th. If you have completed 5th, it kind of gets a little bit more lenient and says, well, an eligible student is functioning 2.3 or more standard deviations below. And then criteria C is what I see as even a more lenient criteria for eligibility, where it says students who have completed the 5th grade functioning between 2 to 2.5 0.29, right? So it gets even a little bit easier, makes it a little bit easier to become eligible. And it also still includes, so if they have 2.0 or 2.29 or more standard deviations and they have some adaptive behavior challenges, then you can also become eligible in that way. And so you kind of see this progression from A to C, where A says 3 standard deviations or below, and then it kind of gets a little bit easier. Or you could do this, or you could do what I consider an even more lenient eligibility with the C criteria. So I wanted to bring this to you so you could see what current eligibility criteria looks like, and what potentially could be some policy shift that we make here as well around our eligibility criteria, right? And so I'll stop here because I don't want to draw out too much, but wanted to tell you what it is and that we're going to have to address it, and that we'll likely bring some sort of very specific proposal to the next seat meeting. But I want to kind of hear you all's thoughts around alternate assessment and that participation, and any ideas that you all may have for us to consider around that proposal as well. So I'll stop here. I think I didn't have any more additional slides, and we'll kind of, we'll start with panel discussion. Ms. Alvada.
I would like to kind of speak to some of the things that we're doing in St. Landry. We have some procedures in place because, of course, we do have to look at the criteria, but when it comes to criteria C, one, they have to produce hefty empirical evidence when identifying a student in this category for alternate assessment. It also, when they are looking at empirical evidence, my IEP facilitator is heavily involved in that process to ensure that schools are producing that empirical evidence that they state that they have for these students. So we have very few students that qualify under empirical evidence category C. And it's for that reason, because we definitely are over on that cap. Previous years, we had an old assessment, for those of you that remember, Law 2. And when that went away, either our children had to take regular assessment or they had alternate, which was Law 1. So now that is something that we're doing in our district, is really looking at C and watching that very closely and having healthy discussions, of course, in IEP meetings about that. So that's definitely something that we found has helped our district.
For that context.
So I have a series. Get it. I have a series of questions, and some wonderings around how this can be approached from a multiple angle, because I don't believe there's a one solution. We have to focus on it. I would think the focus should be on giving the students what they need, right? We understand that we're over the allowable cap, but clearly there's an option for a waiver. So my first note is, one, is there a penalty for this waiver, right? So how are we as a state looked at from the federal angle in requesting this waiver? Is there some punitive, punitive approaches associated with that waiver? So that's a question that I have. Another one is the 1% is noted in the 1% on participation is 1% of the total number of students in the state. So I wonder what's the total number of student population that have a designation of students with significant disabilities in comparison to the number of students in the state. So I don't think that because I would wonder if we have an increase, like if we have a large group of students with that designation, then are we already outside of that 1% in terms of who would meet the first criteria, which would be our significant disabilities? So I would wonder what that number would be. And then we don't want to restrict access for those students if they not only meet the criteria that's listed here in 1530, but that if that's what, again, we're leaning on what it is that those students need. And my concern is if we restrict this for the sake of being under that 1% cap, then we are going to and should anticipate, while these numbers are going to go down, the initial slide that you shared with us about our LEAP scores and our results and making those 1% increases, we can anticipate that going down. And so there's going to be a trade-off. So that's why I want to know, going back to the initial question, is it punitive or damaging to the state to be over the 1%? Because if we set the goal at being under 1%, then the harm to the state and the students is that we're going to go down in those traditional LEAP scores, which I would just have a wondering, you shared the mastery and above, which is, the state goal, but I want to see if there are any successes to celebrate in that basic level, because we know that our students, for most of them, we want them to at least have some basic functioning, while mastery and above is the proficiency level. I would really love to see if we're making growth and headway in that basic. Thanks.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we've also requested our basic numbers too, so we can see that with the new data as well. There are penalties. So, and we've kind of had conversations with OSIP around our last waiver that was not approved. So they've kind of basically said, we have to address it. We've got to start see you making progress going towards 1%. Things they can and will do, usually they'll put a hold on your title fundings, right? Like they'll put some conditions on there until you show progress, and then they'll lift some of those funding conditions. And so we definitely know that we have to address it and start to see progress. It will take time. I love what you said about a multi-prong approach. I agree with that as well. I think it's going to be a couple of things that we will have to do possibly. And it will also take time, right? So we have our next administration for alternate assessment is coming up in January, right? Just 6 short months, it feels like, away. So it definitely will take time, and hopefully over the next year. I mean, I'd like to see progress on the upcoming administration, but I think we also have to be realistic, because whatever shifts we make in the coming months, even policy shifts, right, won't go into place for some time. But we definitely want to start, have a plan and start to make progress here. Also, to your point, Dejane, I do think it would be helpful for us to pull and see the numbers of students qualifying for each of these eligibility criteria, because we do collect that in SIR. So we can pull, which criteria are the vast majority of our kids qualifying under or becoming eligible for alternate assessment under. Any other comments, thoughts?
I have a comment.
Yeah.
So for children, and I'm not really aware of this or not, but are there any preventive services before they hit criteria A to help lower the cognitive functioning and, improve their functioning before 5th grade?
So, and I do know that our school systems do try to be really cautious about placing students on an alternate pathway very early, because we do know that it does really change the trajectory of what their possibilities are. So if I'm a student who is alternately assessed, I'm on an alternate pathway, I'm usually accessing highly modified curriculum. These are your students. They don't have to be self-contained. I want these students included just as much as they can, but typically your kids who you do see in self-contained settings are on alternate assessment. But to your point, Latrice, I do think that we should act with caution in terms of placing students on alternate assessment really, really early. And we don't even recommend doing IQ and cognitive assessments on really young children. So a lot of times you don't even have some of this data yet. And hopefully they are acting with that least restrictive thought of, let me expose these students and see exactly what they can learn, what they can do, and holding them to some rigor and some challenge. So, yeah, I think we're on the same page. I know when our previous seat panel, when they created the K2 alternate eligibility, because we had never had that before the literacy assessment, that was one of the things that was really important, that IEP teams use a lot of caution in making those alternate assessment determinations very early. Any other thoughts, input, Ashley?
Just to add what's already been said, when this discussion happened, I believe it was back around 2016, 2017, advocates had raised concern about putting anybody prior to fifth grade on the alternate assessment. So that was sort of how we landed at this fifth grade level. And then there was a lot of discussion around what the percentage is going to be. 2.5, 2.3, do we stay at 3 across the board? And through a lot of discussion at the seat meeting back when this whole discussion was taking place, they decided on sort of the two different levels for B and C. Just a couple of things that I've sort of picked up on, both as a parent going through this, is especially in middle school, parents start to feel like they're being pressured into making decisions that aren't necessarily in the best interest of their student, but it comes difficult for them to sort of fit specifically in regular gen education with special ed supports and services. And there, especially if the child has significant behaviors, you see a lot of transition and push to move those kids out of regular education and into the alternate assessment, because the behaviors are just, they're difficult. They're difficult for the student, they're difficult for the remainder of the kids in that classroom, for the teachers, for the paras. It's very disruptive. And so you do see some pressure to move these kids onto the alternate assessment. So I am very curious to see how many of the students that are on the alternate assessment truly have a significant cognitive disability classification. I think you would possibly see a high number of students. If you were to dig sort of into their profiles, you might see some students with some high-level behaviors as well, because they are supposedly easier to handle in those self-contained, classrooms. You've got a higher percentage of paraprofessional teacher ratios, and they just are, a little bit easier. But I'm surprised that the rate continues to climb or not decline with the passage of Act 833 and the usage of promotion, which is a piece that's been lost honestly, since 2016, because at the same year we shifted from non-high stakes. And so people just did not use the promotion piece in Act 833, through middle school. And if you don't 100% fit in regular education with those SPED supports and services, there's very much a push towards self-contained. So if we could get that data, that would be great. And you said y'all plan to bring forward like a policy proposal for us in September. Is that the plan? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think you're right. And I think even more support for parents and families around, what does it mean for my child to be on an alternate assessment? What does it mean for my child to possibly be able to take advantage of the April Dunn Act opportunity? So those are definitely some things that our team has talked a lot about too, is I wonder, if there are students out there who are on the alternate assessment but who could take the opportunity and use the April Dunn opportunity and different assessment criteria than LEAP to still get a regular high school diploma, you know, and the different opportunities that offers up to.
And just one more thing, I do think that as we shift to, I feel like an even greater focus on LEAP assessments and ACT, there is just and I don't think it's on purpose, but schools are held accountable for how well their students perform. And it is fact that students with disabilities, especially those with intellectual and developmental disabilities, do not perform well on those standardized assessments. And is there a pressure for school systems to have those kids be placed on an alternate assessment track? Just some things that I think we need to have open dialogue about, not recognize that people are intentionally doing these things, but it's just part of, I think, the bigger conversation that we need to include all of the factors when it comes to why are we continuously seeing, you know, not a decline in how many people are accessing this alternate assessment.
And I think, to your point, Ashley, too, that is also one of the reasons for, so tied to that 1% cap is the feds say school systems can only use 1% of their students who are alternately assessed to count toward their school performance for that reason. So if they have more than 1% of students participating in alternate assessment, they can't use those student scores as part of their school performance. So I think a lot of those regulations were trying to prevent some of that, right? So moving those kids into an alternate.
So what happens if the school's over that 1% cap? What do the rest of the students get counted in the rest of the accountability system and not? Or do those scores, do we know what happens?
So for a student, it's business as usual. The student takes the assessment, they get their scores, all of that is still there. But in terms of school accountability, anything over 1% for alternate assessment schools can't use, right? So they just don't count, right, in their school accountability score, yeah.
For the record, can you list the current alternate assessments that we use at the that schools use?
Yeah, so our 3 through 11 is LEAP Connect. We do have an alternate version of our literacy assessment called the LARR, L-A-R-R, Louisiana Alternate Assessment Rubric. Literacy is alternate assessment rubric, yes.
Starting at what grade?
K to 2, so that one is K2, yes.
Does the federal government provide guidance as to how you determine the eligibility for that 1%?
No, states determine eligibility for alternate assessment participation. So states look different. Yeah.
So a question, do we have comparables available?
I was thinking that. I knew that was where I was going. We can look at that. I'm sure when they set this criteria that there was conversation around what other states do. But we can certainly look at other states' eligibility criteria, yeah, and share that.
And in looking at my question, kind of piggybacking off these two gentlemen, is how are, with our 1.7%, are we comparing to other states? You know, are we in the majority? Are most states over? Or, you know, how do we compare? I'm just curious.
I'll look and find that data, Rebecca. I know it's out there. There are states that are over. You know, and who do apply for the waiver every year. But again, this is definitely something that OSIP is kind of cracking down on. They're not going to continue to approve year after year waivers, and you're not making progress toward 1%. I will say, I think, and we've kind of talked about this a little bit, and Ashley kind of gave us some history too. What I think we will find, and I'll look at that, Michael, with other states is, in order for states to get to 1%, you're probably not going to find that adaptive behavior very often, right? So making sure that we're not making alternate participation decisions based on, you know, that it's truly a cognitive, that the child truly has a significant cognitive, not just, you know, a physical and adaptive, you know, supports that are needed, right?
We're not our own worst enemy.
Right. Yeah. So.
Building off of what Ashley said, I think that there's just like a lot of bigger conversations to have, especially related to the behavior. What accommodations can we then put into place for LEAP that would make us feel more comfortable having those students take LEAP instead of LEAP Connect? And something else that jumps out at me is these standard deviations are based upon reevaluations, right? So I wonder how many of those standard deviations have been just brought over because teachers write no change on the papers, and those reevaluations have just, this is their preschool standard deviation that they got coming in. So I just wonder if that could also help us get our percentage where it's really supposed to be.
Yeah, I think you guys are listening into my team's conversations. And this is really going to be tied to another bulletin that we're working on in 1508 around evaluations, reevaluation, expectations, because we currently have waivers in place, right? You can have multiple waivers for evaluations. If there's no change, the IEP team agrees, the parent agrees. So sometimes, not all the time, sometimes what you see is students who were making these decisions, right? Life-changing, education-altering decisions on evaluations that may or may not be super current, right? And so really thinking about, that's something we've thinking about. We've been thinking through with our special education leaders in our state as well. What is the right thing we believe in our state around evaluations, and when is that required versus not? When should we allow a waiver for an evaluations versus when is it time to get some updated data and make an appropriate decision about where a child currently is and their current capabilities. So I think that will be related to exactly what you're talking about, which ties back to this multi-pronged approach, right?
Also, a quick question about LEAP versus LEAP Connect in terms of inclusion. Is it, I don't know for sure, but is it possible for a student to take the regular LEAP and not necessarily be in full inclusion? Because I know I've taught students with significant disabilities who I would say, oh, I wish you could take LEAP, but they were under LEAP Connect, but cognitively, it's just like the physical disabilities had them in a separate classroom. But I know we've made changes to address, like, you need to be teaching tier 1 and everybody's getting those same standards.
Access to high quality, yeah. So, and some of the things that we hear some of our school systems doing, right? We do know there are students who are very capable. Maybe there are behavior, they have a sensory or environment. And so we have some school systems that while that child may not be able to make it in that general education setting all day for environmental, sensory reasons, but how can we use technology and tap that student into the high quality teaching and learning and have them access that same curriculum, that same level of rigor, so that we can keep those expectations high. And so I think those are certainly things that school systems are and have to think about, what is the appropriate placement with the IEP team, and how am I still going to make sure that that student has access to high quality teaching and learning in whatever that environment is.
And
Meredith.
I was going to add to that. Especially at our high school setting, our junior high and high school settings, we have found that for those students who are not able to be in that large classroom environment, but they're not the LEAP Connect assessment. So what we're doing is we are using technology. We're using Google Classroom, we're using Google Meets. Our students are virtually in the classroom, but they may be in a smaller setting, so that they're still getting that content from that teacher. They're still having the same expectations, but they're not surrounded by all the,
Right.
the factors that are going on in the classroom. And a lot of times our students are choosing that route because they're being a part of that IEP team decision. They're at that age where they can say, hey, I know that I'm not able to be in here. I prefer to be in this setting. And we've actually, last year was our first year to kind of pilot that with some of our students, and we saw great success with it.
Meredith, how did the feds come up with the 1% cap? what is the purpose behind that, the 1%?
I have no idea, Dr. Reno, how they came up with that particular number. But I can ask. I can
Know
certainly ask our
when
state
to-
lead. It's been in place for quite some time.
It's time for an update.
What is the status of the federal waiver request for the literacy assessment? Do you have an update on that?
We have not heard back yet. I believe, I'll check and let y'all know.
When we're considering looking at other states, with this 1%, I highly recommend that we, examine states that are similar to our state. Yep, please make sure that that happens. And also, I think it would be a good idea if we would petition maybe some other school districts and allow them to have a seat at the table to say some of the obstacles that they are facing in their school systems with students with disabilities and administrators when it comes to this alternate assessment criteria and determination.
And to add to that, looking at drilling down on the data to see what districts are over their 1%, right? How do we target those districts for additional support in maybe even the application of whatever criteria is put forth? And then also leaning back on what do the students need? If they're over the 1% and that particular district just has a larger population of students, because I really want to lean into that. If we're evolving, we know that our students are coming to us with many challenges and designations. And so and to your point is, if it's time for us to petition the feds to update that, because our argument is that our population of students is growing. And so that criteria sort of needs to grow with that. I'm just concerned that we focus on reducing that number while leaving out the needs of the students if they, are truly eligible for that. But I definitely see that there's room to help reduce that by just the conversation that's happening based on the practices that are happening in the district.
I just want to ask about the early, I'm sorry, Dr. Donna. I just want to ask about the early childhood services. Are they included in this 1% cap?
So, no. So this is only our third graders through 11th graders that are taking LEAP, ELA, and LEAP Math.
But when when Dibbles becomes accountability, then LAR will be included in that, correct?
So we have that question out to OSIP. So it says that you have to include an ELA and math. So we are going to lean to them to tell us to say, hey, you got to add your literacy into the ELA percentage. So it could, Rebecca, we're waiting on OSIP to tell us, yes, include your literacy numbers in your ELA percentage. Yep.
Is there any conversation about bringing Lot 2 back or something similar?
Not at this time. And really the feds, and this was years ago before this administration, were the ones who told us to take Law 2 away because the feds say you can't hold students with disabilities to a different standard if they're not on alternate, right? So we couldn't have different versions for students who weren't actually meeting an alternate standard, alternate assessment criteria. So we couldn't have LEAP and Law 2 for those students. Actually, the feds are the ones who said, no, you can't do that. Good question, though.
Unfortunate, because a lot of our students are B and C.
Right.
I have a question about, so I'm speaking specifically from the district that I work in. We have a lot of medically fragile students, some who can't even come into our buildings due to their medical conditions, and so we're providing homebound services. We don't know, especially in Orleans Parish, the students that will be through Enroll NOLA, one app that will be assigned to us. And so when they do get to that age of accountability, And this student certainly cannot sit and take a traditional LEAP assessment. We are still being penalized as a, as a network for students that we have no control over their, physical or cognitive. And we are over that 1%. So what is it that we can do for school districts who have those medically fragile students? And we have no say of who comes to our school, right?
Yeah, so there are a couple of options there. So you have some medical options, but those students still have to be provided the opportunity, right, to take that assessment to the best of their ability, whether it's LEAP, whether it's the alternate assessment as well. Yeah. So we also have participation requirements, which we are meeting. We have to have at least 95% of our students with disabilities participating in statewide assessments. And we meet that. We have met that traditionally every year. So we have to afford them the opportunity to participate for sure.
Has
Any
the
other
percentage,
panel? Mhm.
has the percentage fluctuated from when we did have Law 1 and Law 2, or is it similar?
Dr. Bell, I would have to go back and grab that data. I know several years ago, we've been as low as 1.5. And then we've been at either 1.6 or 1.7 for the past couple of years. But I can go back and see, right, what that looked like as far as when we had the Law 2 assessment. Any other panel comments, and then we'll get to any public comment as well, and then we can all come back and have any other discussion. Do we have any public comments, Chelsea?
Something I brought today.
Will you come right here, Ms. Hart, please? Okay. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Catherine Hart. I'm a parent of a child with significant disabilities and also a board member at Pediatric CVI Society. Jody's going to be passing out a handout on CVI. My son actually qualifies on the LAR for an alternative assessment on account of his significant physical disabilities. He will not qualify for the alternative assessment because I refuse to allow a cognitive test, because no cognitive test is valid for students with CVI or for students with significant physical disabilities. Our regular LEAP is not accessible for students with CVI, and our new 1508 requirements, our new 1508 requirements for visual impairment are going to increase our students with visual impairment to about 2.5% of the population. I think only 5% of those kids are taught Braille, which is a problem in itself. So you have 95%, or about 2,000 kids or more, who are visual readers and who do not have access to LEAP because they are not able to make the individualized accommodations the students need. So in front of you, you have a card, and first, look at it this way. Tell me if you recognize what you see, and then turn it this way, and are you able to is anybody able to recognize it yet? Now, if I added color, y'all able to see the cow now? That color around his face. What just happened is your eyes were able to see this image, but your brain didn't understand it. That's what cortical visual impairment is. It's an impairment in the visual processing system in the brain. It's about 30% of our kids with autism, 30% with Down syndrome, the vast majority of kids with cerebral palsy, and some of them may even be misdiagnosed as having dyslexia, because visual dyslexia is also a neurological vision impairment. Color is very important to them to be able to recognize what they see, and our standardized tests are black and white. Even though we're moving to digital where color could be added, our standardized tests are cartoon images And our kids need to see the real thing because they're not able to discriminate between a cartoon image or of a cow and a real cow until they've learned those salient features. And color highlighting helps them to start identifying those salient features. The other thing with alternative assessment that I'd say, get rid of the K through 5 classrooms. EBR has dozens of them. Every self-contained classroom for elementary is K through 5. I had no choice when my child needed self-contained. He was put in a K through 5 classroom. Alternative curriculum, again, I had no choice in the curriculum. He's now going into 3rd grade. He's years behind his peers because he has never been given access to those curriculum standards at grade level and never been taught at grade level. And again, in a K through 5 classroom, even on alternative assessment, there are 2 curriculums, one for 3 through 5 and one for K through 2. The teacher is not able to teach 2 curriculums. So if we want to see a reduction in these numbers, we have to get rid of these classrooms. And it's going to take monitoring to do it because EBR doesn't have a single waiver for those classrooms, even though they're supposed to apply for waivers. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine.
Already on? My name is Jody Rollins. I'm an advocate on a state and now working on a federal level for students with significant disabilities as well as all students with disabilities. I'm uniquely qualified to talk about this because I have 2 children that I will not allow to take the Leap Connect test. The reason I won't allow them to take it is no measurement of their intelligence. Louisiana has created this monster. Dr. Lorene Mayfield came into my son's district, and within 3 months, my sons could read, something that I did not believe was possible for them at that time. Why did the state of Louisiana not care if my sons could read? We do not know the literacy rate of students on the alternative assessment. And also, I'm not sure what you guys know about the alternative assessment, but it's all read aloud. So we don't know if they can read, nor does Dr. Brumley appear to care if they can. I have worked very hard for years and years on this issue. My district has been more proactive than some. I just, if you asked something, Ms. Jackson, if there'd be a penalty. And, I love Louisiana. I'm like 5th generation Louisianian. So my understanding is that the prior administration lowered the requirements to prevent children from being automatically in the alternate assessment. We created the monster because we didn't want children that were low performers in our test scores. We didn't want that. We wanted to give the impression we were doing better. I don't know that we are. And I don't know that we really know if we are, because we are automatically not counting children on the alternate assessment. I tell every parent that reaches out to me to try not to take the Leap Connect if they do not think it properly tests their children. One other concerning thing is I've known SPED teachers who aren't aware of Act 833. Are we doing all we can? Also, you guys were put on this panel to represent all of us. That means the kids with dyslexia and the children like mine that are mostly nonverbal. Our children should count also. So if Louisiana isn't going to fix this issue by actually monitoring the districts, my district made me, and I think I'm the first parent ever made the co-chair of our local special education council with the SPED director. I challenge all the SPED directors in Louisiana to consider that. If you really want to know where your problems are, talk to your parents. Don't just assume when you hand us a little book that we understand. A lot of parents don't understand what AA means. And if you all have any questions, I would love to answer them because I've been at this for years.
All right, any other thoughts, input from the panel And like I said, we'll come back in September and continue to talk through what this proposal would look like. Yeah, sure.
So the state has facilities, like in Alexandria, there's a special education center there.
Mhm.
Are their numbers included in what we see in the one?
Yes, yes, they're included with special school district, which we treat just like an LEA for us.
Good question. Meredith, is there a possibility we can start like some draft conversation before we meet again in September?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm kind of taking down, kind of some of your thoughts as well. But absolutely, if you have ideas, if you have things you want to send me, certainly do that. Okay, seeing no other comments or discussion, we will move on to our next item on the agenda. So our next item is a discussion regarding updates to various bulletins in response to the 2024 regular legislative session. Do I have a motion and a second on this item? Ashley McReynolds?
I
and a
second.
I'm sorry, who was that? Miss Angela Miles. So you guys had quite a number of handouts around this particular item. We are bringing to you all updates to 4 particular bulletins that were impacted by legislation specifically impacting and around students with disabilities. So just to kind of chart it out for you, these are the different acts that we're addressing and the different bulletins. So I'll kind of give a high-level overview, and then if there's any discussion around the policy drafts that you have in front of you, we can certainly have that at that time. So Act 512, you'll see those changes reflected in Bulletin 1706. This was the bill that we really call the parental consent bill. It talked about parental consent for changes to IEPs. So that particular legislation is reflected in the 1706 draft that you see. Then we have Act 198. We also have Act 745. Both of those, and I put those together because both of those had some pieces in them, Act 745 specifically, around the updates to behavioral health services for students in schools. Act 745 is really all about behavioral health services in schools, but it was also mentioned in Act 198 as well. So you'll see those updates and those bulletins. You also have 198 also added specific training required for school board members around special education. It changed the due process timeline to 2 years for parents and families to file for due process. It also added, Act 198 also added a timeline for the special education cameras of 90 days for LEAs to purchase and install those. So Act 198 impacted quite a few. So we had quite a few bulletins impacted just by 198. We also added 198 also covered the Special Education Advisory Council reporting requirements. So we updated that in 741. We also added it to the charter bulletin, which we don't bring here to SEEP, but just so that you all know, we also added the Special Education Advisory Council updates from legislation to the charter bulletins as well, so that they're aware of their responsibilities and those requirements. And then Act 689 is what I call the tutorship bill. That is the one that requires the department to develop and school systems to provide information to parents around continuing or permanent tutorship, shared supported decision-making. There are a couple listed out in there. And that requirement is, we included that in Bulletin 1706. So I'll give you all a minute to take a look at those 4 draft bulletins that you have in front of you. 1922 goes with our next item. But if y'all have any discussions, questions, like I said, these are updates really in response to legislation. I received quite a few emails from the public supporting the policy shifts in alignment to legislation yesterday in my email inbox. So we're feeling really great about the updates around for these policies. But we'll kind of open it up if y'all have any questions, thoughts, and then we'll go to public comment for those. I'll also point out, so our updates to, you'll see an update to 1573, which is our complaint management procedures. SEEP actually last year adopted a 2-year timeline for state complaints as well. And we updated it in 1706. We're just bringing it over to another bulletin as well. I find that we cover certain topics in multiple bulletins, and we want to be consistent that no matter where our stakeholders, our families are looking for policy, they see it in one place if they see it in all. So you'll see that we added that. That was actually put into place by SEEP last year in another bulletin, and we're just bringing it over for consistency. Any discussion around these 4 policy drafts?
It refers to notifying the parent or legal guardian. And so for children that are in foster care, who does that person become in the consideration that the parental rights have been terminated?
That should be their legal guardian within foster care, right? So their foster parent. What would you guys recommend it?
Would that be somebody the school chooses or the agency?
Show me again where you are in 1706. Section. Let's see. That's going to be whoever is on file with the school system as their parent or legal guardian. It's not going to be the school choosing who that is. It would be whomever's on file is having that legal guardianship.
So for children that don't have it, that's understood by the school?
We can make sure that it is, but yes.
For students who are in state custody, the state assumes the legal guardianship. So that would be who,
right.
If I understood your question correctly, but it would be that.
They can attend the IEP, but we can't sign them. So typically it could be who the state chooses. So we want to make sure that the right person is notified of the involvement of that.
Okay. We can check on that too. Whether it's a surrogate. Yeah. Ty, you want to jump in? Questions around any of these?
Yes, I wanted to ask about Bulletin 1573, the complaint process. Are the staff being trained on how to handle complaints and follow up in a timely manner? Or should they be staffed in the local parishes?
So this is specifically around state complaints that come to us as a department. But you're right, school systems should also have an early resolution process in place where parents can, of course, walk into their school system and be supported to solve any disagreements or disputes. This particular bulletin is specifically about state complaints.
And so.
And we do follow, we have very specific response timelines for complaints.
Perfect. Also, it'll be on the state website, how to file a complaint and like the follow-up process and
Yes,
the time frame it'll take as well.
yes, ma'am. And I can share some of those resources with you too.
Ms. Meredith, on
Yes.
Chapter 3, Parent Participation, number 2,
Mm-hmm.
1706,
Yes.
it talks about the parent being able to postpone the prior notice of the meeting.
Mm-hmm.
As long as it is within the timelines, when we send prior notice, if that doesn't work for the parent, we work with the parents to reschedule it.
That's what it's saying. Yeah.
Okay.
And when you give that prior written notice, the parent then, right, can ask you to reschedule. Hey, I need additional time to look over this. Let's reschedule the IEP meeting. Yep.
It was just restated.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question about the SEEK written reports that are going to be submitted to the State Department.
Yes.
Are you all going to do anything with that data? Are you going to analyze it to see if there's any trends or anything? So what are you all going to do with the information that the districts provide?
So the law requires us to collect those links where they post them on their websites. They're also required by law to post their annual reports. And then what I do is I bring those to you all in September. So I'll bring you a report of, here are all the local school systems reports. And we also post that information publicly. Dr. Reno, their reports are typically it's in a document fashion, a word version fashion. This particular update added, they now have to specifically report on 3 things that was updated in law. One of those was the performance of their students with disabilities across assessments in the state, in their district, I'm sorry. They have to report on, there's a piece about financial, they have to report on finances, their IDEA finances, spending, and there's one more I'm forgetting, but it's in here. The third one. Complaints and compliance issues that they're seeing in their school system. So they're kind of reporting that out, Dr. Reno, in a narrative form. And we'll share that with you all in September.
Previous, we were allowed to give an overall report of our meetings, our fact findings, the work that we've done with our panel. So now we need to be very specific for this and still generalize what we did throughout the year with our council.
Yeah. So the only requirement that the law says school districts have to report in those reports are those 3 things. Those are the only 3 things that are listed. But I do know many of our school systems, they still report on their membership. They'll report on, a lot of them will make notes about vacancies or seats that they may be having trouble filling. They'll give a summary of different meeting minutes. So they can certainly still include those, anything additional, but they have to report on these 3 things.
Question, Meredith, about all of the legislative acts and its effects on the bulletins. I know you mentioned you all updated the charter bulletin. Are any of the aforementioned updates have charters exempt from implementing?
None of these will, all of these updates will apply to charters, I believe, Ty. We specifically put the SEEK one in there, just so that they know they also have to have a Special Education Advisory Council and do that reporting. But they're also subject to all other IDA and all of our other special education regulations. It's a good question.
But in terms of, so they're required under IDEA at the federal level, but may not have to abide by the policy that is set forward. So I just wanted to be clear that they aren't exempt from any of the updates that are brought today.
No, they're not. They're not. Good question. Any other questions or thoughts from the panel, and then we'll get public comment. we have any public comment on this item?
Hello, I am here to speak about Chapter 7 Behavioral Health Services, specifically the Behavioral Health Service Complaint Procedures, which I know that you all will be working on the development of. My name is Melissa Raymond. I've been a board-certified behavior analyst since 2009. During my time as a behavior analyst, I worked with countless numbers of families, and most of them share the same goal of having their child enter the public school system and successfully integrate into that setting. While there are some children who receive early intensive ABA or applied behavior analysis services are able to successfully integrate into the school system with ease, many do not. The families that I've worked with want to take advantage of all of the wonderful opportunities that the school systems offer. They want their children to have access to large groups of peers to socialize with. They want their child to be exposed to a new world of information. They want their children to have access um, to all the opportunities. They also want their child to receive a formal education in a public school where a free and appropriate education should be available. The challenge is that most children that I've worked with don't yet have all of the skills that they need in order to learn from the school environment, to be able to learn in the school environment. Just like the symptoms of autism are different, for each individual, what ABA looks like is also different based on each individual. When working in the school setting, ABA services may be a pull-out service, but they may also take place on the playground, during PE, or in the lunchroom around neurotypical peers. The goal of ABA is to teach children the skills they need in order to learn from the classroom teacher. The goal is to teach the child to learn from the environment that he or she is in. The goal of ABA is to help teach the children the skills that they need so that they no longer need support and they can fully benefit from all of the things that the school setting has to offer. ABA looks different based on the needs of the child. The intensity, the setting in which services are provided in, and the individual needs of the student are just a few things that should be considered when reviewing complaints regarding ABA services in school. Additionally, if a parent has filed a complaint with the department, it's likely that they have already spoken with school personnel, attended meetings regarding the matter, and have attempted to come to a resolution without success. If the determination is that the school did not violate the policy, parents need guidance on ways to resolve the concerns that they have raised for their child. If the determination is that the school did violate the policy, the schools need guidance on how to integrate ABA services that they have previously denied. The determination is only the first step. The ultimate goal is resolution. Thank you for all that you do for the children of Louisiana, and thank you for your time.
Melissa?
Good morning, Beverly Haydell. I'm also here, like Melissa, to comment on the behavioral health proposed policy for the department. I serve as the executive director of the Louisiana Coalition for Access to Autism Services, LCAS for short. We're a statewide coalition of ABA therapy providers with a singular mission of improving access to these services for all children with autism across the state. In 2018, our coalition worked collaboratively with behavioral health providers of all types, along with school systems, to get a law passed that was Act 696 from the 2018 session. Our goal in helping pass that legislation was that all children with autism and other behavioral health needs would have access to the right set of therapy services in the public school setting. Unfortunately, since 2018, we've met some resistance from school districts across the state in providing the proper level of access. There are a lot of school systems that do a great job where families are consistently getting the services they need, but or unintentionally in some situations, or sort of found loopholes in the existing law. So we came back this past session, again, worked collaboratively with the department, school superintendents, school boards, behavioral health providers, and we got HB 872, now Act 745, passed. And really the goal of the new legislation is to tighten up that existing law, to add some additional clarity, and also, and importantly for the reason that we're here today, to give the department authority to create its own sort of dispute resolution process that's specific to behavioral health services and outside of the existing IEP process. So we're very appreciative that the department was proactive and has worked really collaboratively with us on helping develop what is contained in the policy, and I think they've done a great job. My main comments to what's proposed in section 705, which is that complaint process, is kind of echoes what Melissa said. There are a lot of different factors that go into the development of a treatment plan by a licensed behavior analyst, including the results of the behavioral health evaluation, as she mentioned, where the ABA therapy service should take place, when it should take place during the school day, the duration of the services. And so as the department is looking at the complaints that are filed by families, we want to just make sure that they're looking comprehensively at all of those different factors. It's not just about whether a child is getting some access to ABA therapy. It's really about whether the child is getting the right type of access that's tailor-made for that child and reflects the medical diagnosis and what's contained in the treatment plan. One recommendation that we think would be really helpful as the department looks into how they implement this is having an actual behavior analyst that they can rely on and consult with as they're evaluating the complaints. So thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Beverly.
It's me again. I want to comment on what Ms. Haydel brought up. In 2019, I actually reached out to Ms. Haydel, and she did try to provide me some assistance in order to have my district follow the law for ABA. My two boys were the first children in Ascension Parish to benefit from that law, and that was in 2020. Since then, I began advocating for other parents. There are certain districts who, quite frankly, aren't allowing it at all. Tangipahoa, shame on you. I'll say it out loud. They're not compliant with state law. Some of what you're seeing in these changes is due to the hard work of myself and other advocates, along with Dr. Hector Linares. But I wanted to tell you all, since you're representing us, not the department, it's us. There were actually 55 things that we brought to Matt Johnson that he was asked to meet with us from Dr. Brumley, and only a few of those things got through. If you're interested in seeing the other issues, because there are many that are creating all the problems and sped in our state, we'd be happy to send you the list. We keep making laws. We keep making laws, and then we tweak the law, and then we dumb down the law, and then we spell out the law. But they're not following the intent of the laws. And currently, the Department of Education here doesn't appear to be monitoring them well enough to make sure that the intent of the law is followed. The BCBAs are highly skilled. Most of our districts don't have enough of them if they have one. If a BCBA who has a license from the state of Louisiana and a master's level education says this child needs this treatment, they should get it in accordance with the law and the BCBA's qualified recommendation. But we're not seeing that. We're still seeing pushback. The biggest reason, I think, is the lack of monitoring from the Department of Education. And until that is corrected, none of this is going to matter. And quite frankly, this panel, it's not supposed to be for show. We're supposed to be here to address why we are where we are, the disproportionality. The bulletin changes, though, there are other things that need to be done, that could be done, that we should do if we want all children to learn. And don't get me started on the charters. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. I just wanted to briefly answer a question, but my name is Gillen Mybaum Norwood, and I'm a unique educator of 20 years. I've taught age 3 all the way up to high school. I also had the privilege of being hired out of Head Start to teach reading remediation at the high school level. So my experiences as an educator have varied, and I appreciate everything that everybody has been sharing today. But what I'd really would like to share at this point, and why I asked to speak, is we had a question concerning foster parents and guardianship and so forth. And that's another passion besides providing care to the children in the various parishes in which I live. I currently live in Natchitoches and commute to Sabine. So I'm working, this year I'll be working with high school sped students, teaching electives in the morning, and then I'll go back to my regular ed children in the afternoon for junior high and social studies and science with the new curriculums, because my expertise also is history besides just being a compassionate educator. But with that being said, I've been a CASA teacher 20 years, a CASA for 20 years, a court-appointed special advocate. And oftentimes, the foster parent, whether it's an assigned family member or not, is neglected in your process. Sorry, I can be very loud, I apologize. They can be neglected. When I say neglected, like in my current case, the foster parent is the grandparent. And she asked at the beginning of the summer for the correction of address to be done, and it never was done. She went to the district, she went to the school level. She knows that one is in a definite IEP, one lost an IEP because of the transition and things that were going on. So sometimes a parent, a grandparent, foster parent, guardian, or even a CASA that is advocating for a child does not always have the option. But what I have learned through my 12 years experience is you speak to the judge directly and you get that clarification in the court order, regardless of what your stand is, if you're going to be involved with the child. For example, I've got a court case coming up, a court hearing for my pair of twins that I currently am CASA for in the next 2 weeks. And in there, I stipulated that I wanted to be a part of the IEP process, that I wanted the privilege to go on the campus of their particular school and participate in parent-teacher conferences. The same can be done. The court order can also be written through DCFS and the caseworker on that level for the foster parent, the guardian, etc., to have that permission, to have that input. So there should be absolutely no questions. I just wanted to share and jump off of what you were saying. And thank you so much, and have a great day.
Do you have any other? Okay, so that concludes public comment on our policy update item. I would like to seek endorsement of these policy changes. That is typically what we like to do in terms of all of our special education policy update. And so we can vote and move this. Ashley?
I'll motion to endorse.
Okay, we have a motion to endorse these policy changes. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you so much. I am really excited. I know, we heard several public comment about change, about policy updates, and I do feel like even our last year in SEEP, we impacted quite a few bulletin changes, and you all are starting your first meeting doing the same. So congratulations to you guys. All right, let's go to our next agenda item. So our next agenda item is a discussion regarding our response to the audit report on risk-based monitoring and some responsive updates to Bulletin 1922 around this. So we'll need a motion to receive and a second.
So move.
Simone, who do I have as a
second.
second? Okay. All right, So our latest legislative audit report on risk-based monitoring was released just prior to our last BESI meeting in June. And so we did bring a discussion around that to June BESI, and of course wanted to bring this to you all as well, talk through some of our responses to the monitoring audit. And so the particular years that the Louisiana auditors used were academic years 2015 to 2016 through 2021, 2022. They looked at specifically our risk-based monitoring. And so that process of how we rank LEAs based on a number of risk factors and say, who needs our highest level of support and monitoring versus those who are more at a lower risk level. And so this particular audit looked at how we are monitoring and providing oversight for special education throughout the state. And so just a couple of notes here. So this particular scope, of course, includes COVID impacts on monitoring, includes the 2016 flood as well. So different factors that played into how our statewide monitor team could go out and do on-site monitoring. So just to add that context in there as well. And also, you know, just noting that we as a department are certainly committed to improving monitoring, doing more. A lot of this scope was, of course, prior to our current administration. We'll talk a little bit about that. And we certainly received this as opportunity for feedback. What more can we do, and how can we continue to improve monitoring in our state? And so just to provide a little bit more background, just so you all kind of know how our current monitoring process was designed and developed in our state, alongside stakeholders, alongside BESI at the time in 2016. I know, because I know many of you are going to ask, IDA does not set forward, this is how you are to monitor. This is how a model program or a model monitoring, this is what you should do, states. No, they leave that up to states to design a reasonable system of monitoring for their school systems. And so ours was the current process was codified and developed back in 2016 using the timeline and process that you see here that also included SEEP, of course, and BESI input at the time. But of course, we took the results of this particular audit and determined, okay, what is our response? What do we want to bring forward to BESI? What do we want to bring forward to you all to talk through? These were the high-level results of the audit. I will say, you know, just the biggest thing is around more on-site monitoring. So the legislative auditors went out with our monitoring team. We've been engaging with them really for nearly 2 years. They went out, they watched the process, and really what you glean from this particular report is they want more. And so one of the things that we started working alongside them with, and the agency also went to the legislature to be proactive around increasing. So to do more, you need additional capacity. And we've talked a lot about that with BESI around the capacity to actually do this work. But these were the high-level results. They looked at the school systems who did not get an on-site review. So we had gone out to over half of the sampling that they looked at. And we know that since in 2020, right, so this ended, the scope ended 21-22, and we have actually done desk or on-site monitoring for the rest of those school systems that hadn't received an on-site when they looked at that. So that has since been responded to. and cleared up. They talked a lot about staffing, that the LDOE, the result from the report was that the LDOE decreased the number of employees. We'll talk about that. There was a legislative budget cut prior to this administration that resulted in a large reduction in force here at the agency in 2012. All of those things impact the capacity of staff to go out and be in our school systems. But was certainly something that we wanted to be proactive about, request additional positions from the legislature to impact this work. And so I'll talk about that in our response plan. They suggested that we look at our process for selecting student files and how we monitor student files, looking at our policies and procedures for informal removals, and also looking at our significant disproportionality calculations. And so let's talk a little bit. So you all have, okay, so this is a visual right from the report that really shows that reduction in force in 2012 and how that impacted the department's staffing and numbers. And of course, those things impacted our special education team and our monitoring team. We were awarded 6 additional special education monitors from the Louisiana legislature. So we feel confident about that response to this report, and that will double our statewide monitoring team. And so that in fact, we can increase and provide more of that on-site monitoring. Just to give you a very high level, it is an in-depth process when we go out and do on-site monitoring. That includes a parent forum and meeting in that school system. It includes visits into schools, into classrooms. It includes file reviews. It includes looking at service provision within the school system. And so there are a lot of communication. There are letters that are sent to the schools saying, hey, this is what we're coming to do. And then throughout that process, there is a lot of boots on the ground work that's happening with our monitoring team, reviewing files, using protocols, and then closing that out. There's additional work with school systems if there is corrective action required, and they are assigned an LGOE person to help make sure that any noncompliance is corrected, that they meet their corrective action plan timelines and activities. So it is an intensive process. The auditors did like that process and ultimately says, hey, we do want you to do more. And I think that's, also what we hear from some of our stakeholders as well. So a couple of things that you all have, you have a response timeline that kind of tells you about those positions. We are also bringing to you all a policy update. So one of the things that we did was we took some of our monitoring team members, my team members, we applied and were accepted to attend a national monitoring policy writing workshop in June. And one of the things while we were there were other states who had applied and been accepted to that workshop. One of the things that we actually found was we were one of the only states that came there with a policy. Many states had come and they have had no monitoring policy and were there to actually write. We wanted review, we wanted to know what to do better, we wanted their input, and of course to be in alignment with federal and with OSIP's expectations. And so it was a great experience for us. We got to collaborate with a lot of states. We also received very specific feedback on our current monitoring policy. And so you're going to see updates in this policy update that are going to do 2 things. First, it's going to respond to some of the requirements from the audit, right? Specifically adding in that we will provide monitoring activities to every LEA once within a 6-year cycle. That is not in IDEA, but it was released OSIP guidance about a year ago. So we're going to align with that, and we shared that with the auditors, and you see it. It was referenced in the audit report about monitoring LEAs once every 6 years. So that language we added. And then there were other clarity edits within 1922 updates based on our feedback from the national experts at that policy writing workshop, and kind of what they suggested that we clarify, add. And so that's the policy update that I bring forward to you, along with the response timeline as well. And so I'll give you guys a few minutes just to kind of take a look at that. And then if we have any discussion, comments or questions around this particular item, we can open that up now. You guys have a document that says response plan to risk-based monitoring? Okay. And it should be a little timeline on the back. That's the wrong one. That was our first audit response. So there's another one. Let me see if I can pull it up. Sorry, y'all. Share it with you guys. Oh, our time. About that, I apologize. I see the one for complaints, which is the old one. That was our first audit response that we brought to SEEP last year. We have one for the risk-based monitoring as well. So let me read you. So we had three months that we were covering. So in June, our actions were to attend that national writing workshop, the policy writing workshop on monitoring, and receive feedback. We also applied and adopted OSIP's alternate risk ratio. So the recommendation from the auditors about making sure we were appropriately calculating significant disproportionality for school systems with small numbers. You have to calculate an alternate ratio. So we adopted OSIP's tool in order to do that. We applied it with our last calculations. And then also in June, we requested OSIP, their technical assistance around reviewing our monitoring, our compliance monitoring procedures. That was the policy review I mentioned. And then we were going to address any of their feedback, which we brought you today. And then this past month, we were posting those 6 new special education monitoring positions so that you guys knew and Bessie knew that we were on to writing those job descriptions and getting those posted so we could impact on-site monitoring for this school year and start to see that increase. And then, of course, in August, we said we are going to conduct time and effort training. So there was a section of the audit around employees paid with IDEA funding. And so we're going to implement some training for all employees about what that means to be federally funded through your salary with IDEA. What are the requirements around that? What time and effort documentation are required? So we're going to do some federal training around that with all of our staff. We're also piloting coming up this fall in August a web-based monitoring data system. So something the auditors are always really interested in is how you're collecting and tracking activities. And so one of the things that we're going to be piloting is a web-based system for collecting, monitoring activities, who's being monitored, outreach with the schools, with our staff, not web-based monitoring of LEAs, a web-based documentation process, right? Because we want more of the on-site reviews and actually going out. So it's about a web-based monitoring documentation process for that team. And then, of course, in August, we will bring, one of our other actions was to bring this Bulletin 19 with you guys' endorsement today. We'll bring it to August Bessie to update our monitoring procedures and policy. I apologize about that. So that was our response timeline. And then, of course, equally important is the policy update you see in front of you. And so that one is the 1922 draft policy. And we'll open it up to the panel for any questions or discussion.
Meredith, can I get clarity on what should we have in front of us in terms of an endorsement? I know you said the policy 1922.
Yes.
I don't.
You don't have the correct response timeline. That's the 3 months that I just read to you, but I can send it to y'all.
Okay, thank you.
But if we can endorse policy, that
For 1922, okay, got it. And then I have a question about the responses even included in what was brought last year. Do we have updates on implementation of what was brought last year? So it may not have been totally, washed that we had that document in
I
front
could
of
give
us.
you an update on, so that was, the first audit was on our complaint procedures. And so we have taken quite a few steps around improving the complaint process for parents, making that more accessible, more responsive. We have 2 new staff helping us with that. So Ty is our new dispute resolution coordinator, working our complaints. And we have Chastity, who is our new special education ombudsman, who can really assist families with the process and help answer any questions, connect them with school systems, help them work together to resolve disagreements. So those were really big improvements in that area, was really the department's response to how are we going to better support families through those processes. We brought several policy updates as well in response to that first dispute resolution audit, around extending the timeline, like I said, for parents to be able to file complaints for 2 years. We also placed some additional responsibilities on the department. So we will start to post, one of the things we changed, we will start to post this fall results for the public on complaint decisions in our state. So federally, you're required to report on due process. We kind of took it a step further as a panel that was recommended and put that into policy that will also post state complaint decisions. We also put into policy a couple of other things that allows us to also use state complaints when we're considering targeted monitoring for school systems. We took out some barriers that were in policy around that now allows us to go into school systems without school board approval. So there were a couple of those things that were in policy that we cleaned up as a result of that, the dispute resolution audit as well.
I note that assigning a special master to LEAs that needed additional support, how many LEAs are now assigned that special master?
We currently have 1.
And then finally, I know LDOE released the parent survey. So how are we using those results to also implement and drive whatever supports are needed or designated? How are we collecting that data, reviewing that, and when will it be brought to the panel?
we'll probably bring it to you guys in the winter. So the survey just closed. We will collect and analyze all of those responses, and we report those to OSIP and the feds in February. So we can bring it to you all in the winter, kind of ahead of that reporting.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Training for districts regarding federal spending, you said October, regarding funding for staff and how IDA funds are used?
We're doing that for our department staff.
Department.
So this particular audit looked at department staff and how we are using IDA funds. So we're doing a federal training for us. But Alvada, that's not to say that's not a conversation we could have about things we could also offer to our LEAs for that same purpose.
I think
Good
that'd be
question.
beneficial. Thank you.
Other questions about policy?
Just a couple of questions. I don't see anything specific in here around on-site monitoring. I see like a more open, integrated, comprehensive process. I know y'all have hired 6 more staff. I know the push is to do more on-site monitoring. At least once within a 6-year period base, so moving that up, are these going to be all on-site visits, or is this going to be a combination of the desk? And then if, y'all flag certain LEAs, will you go in, like skip the desk side and go in and do on-site?
Yeah.
How is it, I guess, going to be structured?
Yeah, so for once every 6 years, OSIP really doesn't tell you the type of monitoring, or do you have to go in on site? That is what that is what we
Okay.
intend to do.
Okay.
And while this is in alignment with federal policy, we look at internally trying to get to LEAs, maybe not necessarily on site, depending on our new capacity, maybe, but at least doing a desk or on site once every 3 years.
Okay.
So, we intend to do more than once every 6, because that does feel lengthy. So we're looking to shorten that, but to be in alignment with the audit recommendations and the feds, it's a 6-year timeline.
Okay. And then, and I could have missed it, and this got brought up both in I believe, the audit, and then some of the concerns that advocates had shared back when they had the huge shift in the monitoring policies was the parental piece. And with those on-site visits, the effort to include parents, include students, to have sort of that open dialogue, is that a part of any of this, or is it going to be, I guess, delivered once the on-site is determined? Will there be efforts made to sort of go back and do that style of?
So for our on-site, that's standard.
Okay.
They'll do a parent meeting. They usually try to do it in the evenings to be responsive to parent availability and after work hours. And they'll do a little parent forum, which gives you really great information. Are there some specific areas that parents have concern about? And as they give you that input, does it change or drive monitors to a certain school or location or set of services or specific questions that they want to ask? And so it is a really valuable component of that on-site monitoring for sure. So that will still happen.
Okay, good. And then my last question is on the last page, when it talks about, any type of corrective action, the non-compliance with the findings, what enforcement actions, like specifically, like some examples, I guess, of what would that include?
It can include anything literally that IDA regulations cover. So, if it's a student whose evaluation timeline lapsed for whatever reason, And I will also stop in a minute and let Alvada and Rebecca talk about monitoring and what they have to do for correction. But there is a corrective action plan that's developed. Some of it can be, hey, you're going to provide training to all staff on XYZ on Act 833. If we didn't see that implementation or something looked wrong, but it's also requires if there are any student-specific findings, like an eval went out of timeline, the way that we look for correction of that, because you can't turn back the time clock, right? But we look at that next quarter, our assigned LDOE manager on that specific district monitoring case, they're going to be running eval compliance reports and saying, okay, did the next quarter, did they get all of those evals done on time? So did they correct whatever those actions or whatever their procedures were in place? And sometimes we know there are exceptions and reasons why evals do go out of timeline. They know that there's no exception, it's out of timeline. We know parents may request extensions, we know, but in that next quarter, were those evaluations complete? That's one example. Services, if they find a gap in services, they may require compensatory services for those students. So, those corrections could look different depending on whatever the case is for that student. Avada, you want to add anything?
Sure. We try our best not to have any corrective action, but just as Ms. Meredith said, sometimes the inevitable happens. For example, we may get a student in our district and they are in the middle of a timeline lapse of an eval, but they become ours. So that may happen, and that eval falls out of timeline, no fault of ours. We got the kid, we had to. So we have to submit a corrective action plan. So for example, one of our corrective action plans that we put into place, the department does require 100%, 3 months of compliance on timelines. So when we're getting students, we have a form that we've created in our SIR department. When we receive the student, and we work with our appraisal team, our coordinator, to follow those kids very closely to make sure that doesn't happen again. So there's procedures that we have to put in place, and it's very individualized depending on the findings per case that we may have. And we do a lot of self audits in our department to eliminate a lot of those issues before we actually get monitored. But that corrective action also have to be submitted to the department once we have all of our findings.
Right, and just to add to that, a lot of times there are things that are just out of our control, and we can't get in touch with parents. As Alvada stated, students move from district to district, and so that's one of the things we've also started with our SIR department is we're moving to more Google Docs so that we can keep a running tab of those timelines. And then to also answer the special masters, I think there was some confusion when all of that came out too. So to clarify that, because we did receive a technical assistance based off of 2020, 2021 data. And so she came and met with me, and we have a plan in place. And part of it was due to being out of timelines during that year. However, since then, I don't believe we've been out of timeline, but, it's just mainly taking those steps and assuring that we are doing our due diligence to be able to provide the services, the evaluations. So we're not all under a special master, but some of us did receive technical assistance from LDOE, just to help us to make sure and make a plan for this year.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Rebecca. And that's tied to some of the federal data we'll get to later. They report on indicators to us, and we kind of provide technical assistance. We started that last year, but just to kind of proactively help them address certain areas. And two, it could be, our monitoring protocol gets down to some very specifics, like present levels of performance. Was that included? Was it updated on the IEP? And so that can get very specific and say, okay, go back, amend this IEP and fix present levels, or go back and amend this IEP and, write this goal up to XYZ standards. So it could be a number of things, Ashley.
Impact statements were very big.
Yeah.
So we had in-department PDs, and we even did PDs by zones in our schools to provide that, because it's hard to have PDs when you're also teaching children. And that was kind of new to our teachers. So we do personal PDs, we have sign-in sheets, we have an agenda, an array of training to correct those. So we don't look at it as punitive, we look at it as growth to fine-tune our department and to continue helping our students with disabilities and our staff.
Is that protocol you're talking about a public document? So be something I would like to look at.
Yeah, absolutely. So our monitoring protocol, it is on the website, and I don't mind sending it to y'all either. Any other thoughts about the 1920 updates? Again, hoping to seek endorsement here so we can bring this to August Bessie for consideration as well. Public comment as well. Any other comment here, and then we'll go to public comment. Just a reminder, public comment, folks, please make sure we're sticking to the agenda item and kind of helping our panel make decisions and getting that input around this particular bulletin update. Do we have any public comment on this one, Chelsea? Okay.
So I wanted 6 minutes because I wanted to provide public information since in particular, I triggered the audit. I'm one of the parents, but they don't want me to do that. If you have questions, I'd be happy to answer. But essentially, Louisiana used to have a SPED department, and years ago, before this administration, we got rid of it. So we used to have 100 employees in SPED, and now we don't have that. But we have IDA funds, but it's paying people who may not necessarily work in SPED as much as they should. I don't work here. I haven't said that yet. I don't work here. And I also forgot to mention last time that I had to get a lawyer to get ABA. And as I started volunteering, in every meeting I was in with Meredith and Cade and Bessie members, private meetings, it became apparent that in order to enforce the laws, a parent had to get a lawyer. And that is not fair. I could get a lawyer because I have access. A lot of parents don't. I went to legislators with the consent decree from Orleans, which I'm sure you're familiar with, and explained to them that since that consent decree, that those issues that are in there have spread across Louisiana like a virus because all of our effort became focused on Orleans. The farther away you get from Orleans, the less likely you are to get help. So the people in Tangipahoa, they are really at a loss. I'm in Ascension, I'm lucky. I also, my father's in hospice, and I'm here today. I'm here because for the last 3 years, I have seen the treatment of parents and children with disabilities, and it disgusts me. All I originally asked for was a memo from Dr. Brumley in this department to express upon our districts that these laws are laws for a reason. I couldn't get them to do that. This is a lot of work for us. The things that are in this report, they wouldn't have done any of this without this audit. Why not? Why do our children with disabilities mean so little to the state of Louisiana? And why do I've spent more time with Meredith than some of my employees this year. And I own a small business. I come here because I care. I care. You guys have a real obligation here to understand what is in this document and our risk-based monitoring. I was told personally in a meeting with Meredith, and tell him if I'm lying, that one of the foundations of our monitoring is trust. No company, no entity operates that way. We can't do that. We can trust yet verify. I had an advantage with Dr. Mayfield, who knew the history of, she helped write Act 833. She also has been in Louisiana working in SPED for 24 years to take me from where we were to where we are now. It's just going to get worse. And it shouldn't have taken the audit. I shouldn't have had to do the things I've had to do just to get my son taught to read. Please ask me questions. Don't you guys want to know why we had to do this and what that document means? Do you have any questions? I mean, Ashley brought up something excellent. Ashley, that special master idea was Dr. Mayfield. I just want you to know that. She brought that up in a private meeting with Dr. Brumley. And when they asked us how many districts need them, Hector Linares and I said every last one. Not because they're intentionally harming children, because due to our monitoring, they may not know they're in a crisis, and many of them are.
Thanks, Jody. Who else we have, Chelsea?
Hello, Catherine Hart, parent of a child with disabilities in East Baton Rouge Parish. East Baton Rouge Parish has a special master. However, I don't know what she does. I've actually filed state complaints and OCR complaints since that special master has been nominated because this department did not go through the proper procedures and go through the court system to give that special master any authority. She's expensive advice. At this point, the school district does not have to do what she says. They can take it into consideration. A lot of educational laws were passed this year, and everybody's asking, how are these going to be enforced? And I'm telling them, well, we're told over and over again by this department and Bessie that the legislature gave them no enforcement mechanisms for special education, so they can't enforce any of the laws the legislature just passed. If they start trying to enforce the 10 Commandments, well, that's going to be an OCR complaint because they won't enforce the special education rules. We have to get better at monitoring, and we have to get better in enforcement. The district in LDOE's own backyard is regularly not complying with the bulletins. As I mentioned, the K through 5 classrooms, which they do not have waivers for and are supposed to be for rural districts. They're not giving children who are homebound, they're not looking at whether they qualify for ESY, and have a blanket policy to do all virtual school for them, which is not individualized. If we don't get boots on the ground for on-site monitoring, a lot of this is covered up because they are very good at making it look like the kid is in general education when they are actually homebound. My own son's ESY for homebound actually says general education on the IEP. Okay, so you're not going to get that by just doing a desk monitor. You have to do on-site monitoring, and we have to get better at this, and we have to start meeting our own timelines. Hi, Ty. I got a state complaint that's 136 days now.
Okay. No more public comment. Do we have any additional thoughts here? And again, we're seeking endorsement of the 1922 monitoring updates so that we can bring those to Bessie as well. All right, Dejanay moves to endorse. Do we have a second?
Second, Alvada Willis.
So let's move to our final action item, and I do believe this will spark some really great discussion. So let's get a motion for our update regarding our state performance, annual performance report, and a planning conversation with you guys. Yes. We can get through this and have our discussion, and hopefully we'll stay on time to end at 12:30 because we do have a meeting following us. You got that one? Okay. All right. And Ashley Augustine on our team is also going to help me work through this particular update. We're going to talk a little bit about our last federal data submission, what those results look like, and just to kind of set the difference. So this particular data is reported on previous years. So you'll see some state performance, some LEAP results. That's going to be from the 2023 So we report everything to the feds from the previous year. So I shared with you guys at the beginning of this meeting a bit about the continued progress we saw from 2024. That won't hit our federal reporting until February, right? So, which will be great because we hope to continue to see our movement towards some of these same targets continue to increase. So let's talk a little bit about our state performance plan. The last time that we set targets with SEEP was in 2021. So there, on that 6-year cycle, every 6 years, we will come to SEEP, look at this data, and we set targets together. We're going to be reporting to you all today performance against set targets. So IDA requires us to have a performance plan in place. That is these 17 targets that we're going to talk about. And it requires us every year in February to do a lot of federal reporting and updating towards these targets and updating OSIP on our plans. The state performance plan includes 17 indicators. These are public. You can click here and look through the 17 indicators. You have them in front of you. We also gave our panel nice little neat cards that we get from OSIP. It's just a really nice like snapshot way of looking at what are these indicators that we're required to set targets around. And so every year, like I said, we report against these targets in our annual report every February. Our annual report reflects our progress toward meeting those goals, and it consists of what is the target. And again, we set the current targets with SEEP. I was coming into this role in 2021, and we were, one of our very first meetings that I joined, we were setting targets and talking about our data and setting, I tell everybody, these are not targets that were set that we intend to meet. They're intended for me to be rigorous and to push us and to push our students and to push our LEAs to make sure that we're setting high standards, that we're setting rigorous targets and trying to support students to meet them. So if we have slippage, so if we go back, we have to talk to OSIP and explain to them, hey, this is what we think happened. This is what we plan to do in the future. And so every year about this time, we like to bring an update to our SEEP panel, kind of talk about where we are and lead into ultimately a discussion of what are your priorities? What are some things that you really want us to address together this year and kind of end on a planning conversation note. So these reports, and they are very tricky, they run off of federal fiscal years. So federal fiscal year 2022 was, like I said, previous school year. So the 2022-2023 school year is the data that we report in 2023. It's years and federal fiscal years. So we are currently in the current cycle is 2020 to 2025. So we'll be coming back to SEEP in just over a year to relook at our targets and see what changes we want to make. Our 17 indicators that you have in front of you on your card are a mix of compliance and a mix of results. So you'll see statewide performance represented. You'll also see compliance around what are those things that are very important to ensure proper special education services. Are evals done on time, for example? Okay, so you have compliance measures and you have results measures. All of our compliance measures, those targets are set for us. They're either 0% or 100%. Those are set by OSIP. But the results targets are the ones that every 5 years we have the flexibility as a state and as a panel to make changes to, responsive to the needs of our kids and of our state, and where we want to push and move forward. So I want to pause because you do have a couple of handouts. So you have the indicator list there So as we're talking about them, you can go back and see, okay, which one was that? What was being measured in that indicator? And you also have what we call our SEEP data visualization. So in our last report in 2023, what was our performance against these targets? And Ashley and I want to kind of talk through and pull out certain ones, kind of talk about them, what we think happened, some things we may want to do or look at moving forward as a panel. I want to pull this one out very specifically, and we shared this with Bessie recently as well. I also like to update our state board periodically on our performance. And this is one that I pulled out. This is part of our results measures. So this pulls out our statewide data. We have targets on students who are taking LEAP, and we also have our students with significant disabilities who take LEAP Connect. That is also indicated in a target, and I'll talk about them as well. So I pulled out our LEAP, and again, remember, this isn't 2024, the most recent. This was the previous year. And I pull this out really to show the progress. And what is interesting is, right, so this particular indicator, the performance, our state assessment indicator, Ashley knows the numbers off the top of her head, has all of these sub-indicators. OSIP likes to see grades 4, 8, and high school for ELA and for math. Indicator 3. But if you don't meet one, you don't meet the whole indicator. So for some of these, we really have to dig in and look at what's beneath and what's really happening, because 5 out of those indicators, we either met or we showed growth. So the plus in the checks is met and showed growth. You'll see 4th grade ELA, last year we declined 1.36% in 4th grade ELA. The year prior to this, our reporting in 2022, none of them went down, but there was one target out of the 6. We grew, but we didn't grow to the target. And I think my point in pointing this out is that we have to continue work on inclusive practices, on ensuring kids with disabilities have access to high quality teaching and learning. Our previous panel endorsed our inclusive work, and we believe that that is still very important, and it's the only way that we're going to continue to see this kind of growth. And like I said earlier, I want to see more. I want to see more than just 1% or a few percent in some of these. And so that work of our team is just so important. So as we think about moving forward, think about, what more around inclusion, what more around ensuring that these students have access to high quality teaching and learning, and so that we can see these kinds of growth and impact, right? So this is our LEAP performance. You'll see on the indicators, so we also have targets set around our students who are on alternate assessment and their performance on LEAP Connect. Those percentages are larger. We have 50% plus of those students on LEAP Connect who are showing proficiency. We didn't meet any of those targets though. And we declined, 1% in some of the, so they look at the same grade bands, 4, 8 in high school for students who take LEAP Connect. And so while our proficiency percentages are higher on LEAP Connect, we went back a few percent. And so, just something to think about. I always want to see, I know those students are met with different challenges, but I always want to see us making sure those students are making progress, making sure those students are growing. And we've heard throughout today, that it's just as important for us to make sure those students have access to high quality teaching and learning as well. So you'll see that one is on there, and we didn't meet those targets for the LEAP Connect performance. And I wanted to pull out
Where is that located for LEAP Connect?
on your data visualization sheet. Let me see which indicator it is. This one. So you'll see the participation targets. It's 3C. Yeah. So they roll all of the LEAP into, it's indicator 3, but there's a B, C, right? So 3C is performance on statewide alternate assessment, and it'll tell you for fourth grade reading, our target was to be at or greater than 54%, and we were at 50, right? And like I said, you know, we set these when we did our latest target setting process alongside SEEP. You know, we set them to be rigorous, right? And I think that would be a practice that we would want to continue. Is for me, it's great when we meet targets, but then for me, when we're meeting them, we should be resetting and going, okay, let's keep pushing. What's the next target? So, so they are intended to be rigorous. You'll see, Donna, eighth grade reading on Leap Connect, we want it to be at 60%. We're at 56.27, so on and so forth. So 3C is the alternate performance that we reported. And this was another set that I wanted to pull out because I know this panel has been, and we're very interested in post-secondary high school outcomes for our students with disabilities, making sure they have a plan for the day after high school. What is their next plan? What are their options on the next day? And we look at our graduation, and I want to talk about this for a bit because this is something that we set straight in our reporting this last time. So one of the things that we found was in previous years, our students graduating with the alternate, so our Leap Connect, our students who are taking Leap Connect and getting that alternate diploma, they were being reported as a regular diploma. We had to self-correct that. So that is the reason this percentage went down so much. And I think this is going to be something as a panel when we reset targets, and maybe even before then, so we can decide as a panel before, you know, a year and a half, whenever it is, we're set to come back and we have to address targets. We could address it before then, as long as we have the proper input. You know, and I explained to OSIP that we worked alongside our stakeholders and our SEEP, and we want to change this target because we believe that we've now reset it. So this was not something that we realized when we came on and were setting this target. It was coming in. But you cannot report an alternate diploma as a regular. We know that. It's not the same. It's not the same requirements.